Hey, what's going on, guys? In this project, we're going to be building a coming soon or an under construction landing page from scratch. And we're not using any frameworks or anything like that. It's just vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, we're going to include this dynamic counter here at the bottom that updates every second. So we can simply set a launch date and it'll calculate the days, the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. And this is something that's very practical that you can use for your own projects. This is actually for an application I'm working on for my full stack React course. It's a social network called the Dev Connector, but of course you can switch out the logo and the background image, the text, whatever you want. All right, it's also completely responsive, so if we were to make this smaller, you'll see once we get to a certain point, what I've done is I've changed we're actually using flexbox for these boxes here, and I've changed the orientation to column and just stretched out the width, and I got rid of the minutes and the seconds and the hours because when you're on a mobile device, it's going to be much shorter, and we're setting an overflow of hidden, so there's going to be no scrolling. I don't want there to be any scrolling at all, so I feel that if I kept that, the other stuff, it would just be too long. So I think that it's fine for on mobile devices to just show the days. All right, we also have a responsive height, so if I were to make this shorter, once we get to a certain point, you'll see that the logo gets smaller, the little paragraph goes away. If I go even shorter, then the H1 should go away as well. All right, so it still looks good even at a very small height. So that's what we'll be building. Hopefully you guys enjoy this and you can use this in your projects. Feel free to use it. It's completely open source. So let's get to it. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. Over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below. Alright, so let's get started here. So I just have VS Code open and I have an empty folder called Coming Soon Landing, and there's nothing in it, so we're going to create this from absolute scratch. So let's create our index.html file, and we're going to need just a couple folders here. So let's create our CSS folder, and let's create our JavaScript folder, JS, and let's also create a folder for images, so img. Now I will have the Codepen in the description, which will have some links to some remote images, so you can grab the images from there, especially the logo. One of the images, the background, I got from pexels.com, and I'm not exactly sure what I searched for. It might have been programming. Let me see. And you can use any image you want. It doesn't really matter. But if you want to be exact, yeah, it's this one right here. So I got the 1920 by 1280 version. All right, if you want to be exact. And then the logo you'll be able to get in the Codepen. I might even put a link to it in the description. All right, so let's get started here. The HTML is going to be very simple. I'm just going to use Emmet to put in some boilerplate code. Actually, you know what, let's also add in our CSS file and stuff. So let's add style.css, and let's add main.js, and then I'm just going to bring the images over as well. Alright, so in the img folder, I'm going to bring over 3 things. There's actually 3 images because I'm actually going to create a favicon for this as well. Just in case you guys don't know how to do that, I'm going to use a program called Dynamic Drive, or a website called Dynamic Drive, that allows us to take a PNG or a JPEG and turn it into an ICO file. But if we take a look at these images, they just look like this. Okay, this is the main logo, this is the background, the showcase, and the favicon. All right, so let's go ahead and continue with our HTML. So I'm just going to change the title here to just say Coming Soon, and we're going to add a link to our style sheet, which is in the CSS folder, and then style.css. Let's also add a link to our JavaScript. So that's going to be in the JS folder, and it's going to be main.js. All right, and then let's go ahead and put in a section here. I'm going to use a HTML5 section tag and give it a class of landing. And then in here, we're going to have a class of landing dash inner. And the main reason for this class is because I want an overlay. I don't want just the image as the background, because there's just too much noise. We won't be able to read our text. So we want an overlay where we can actually add a background color, like a darker color with some opacity, with some transparency. So that's why we're doing that. And then let's put our logo in. So it's going to be an image, and it's going to be in the image folder, and it's called logo.png. For the alt, I'll just say dev connector. You can put whatever you want. And under that, we'll put our paragraph, and we're just going to say a social network for developers. And guys, the React course should be out within, I'd say, 30 or 40 days as an estimate. It's going to be completely full stack, Node.js, Mongoose on the back end, JWT tokens, all that stuff. So look forward to that. H1, we're going to do an H1 with the class of coming soon. And we're just going to say coming soon. And then under that, we'll have another H1. This is going to be a placeholder for the countdown. So I'm going to give it a class of, sorry about the phone, guys. I feel like every video this happens. Let me just shut this off. All right, so we have an H1 as a placeholder, and that's it. That's our HTML. So we'll save this, and you can go ahead and just open the HTML file if you want, but I'm using live server with VS Code, so I'm going to say open with live server. And we're just going to see something like this. All right, so now let's go to our CSS. Okay, CSS is next. We'll do the JavaScript last. Now I'm going to just go ahead and set everything to have a box sizing property of border box, and that's just going to make sure that any padding or border or anything like that goes inside of the box model. All right, so it doesn't add to the width or the height or anything like that. Then we're going to take the HTML and body, and we're going to set margin to 0. Let's set the font family. I'm just going to use Arial, which is right here. And let's add a color. We want white as our color. And someone asked me recently why I use hexadecimal values and not the color name, and it's just preference. You can use the word white if you want. It's just a preference. No special reason, I guess. So the background, I'm also even though we're going to have an image background, I'm going to set the background color to a dark gray, almost black. And then I'm going to set overflow hidden, which is going to make it so that we can't scroll. So let's say overflow hidden, and that's our body. So let's save. Okay. Next thing we'll do is the landing. Okay, which is the main section, has a class of landing, and we want to position this as relative because the landing inner that goes inside of it is going to be positioned absolute, and we want this class to be its parent, so it has to be relative. And then we'll set the background image, and we're going to set that to a URL, and let's say .. because we need to go outside of the CSS folder into the image folder, and then we want showcase.png. Okay, we want to add a couple background properties here. So we want background size, and we want it to cover. Okay, we want it to cover everything. We also want to position it, so we'll say background position, and let's say center. Okay, and then the height, I want to take up the entire height of the browser window. So we're going to set it to 100 VH, which is viewport heights. All right, so if we save that, let's see, why aren't we seeing it? Section class landing. What did I miss here? Image showcase. Oh, it's a JPEG. I'm sorry. It's not a PNG. There we go. Okay, so now we just have the actual image. There's no overlay, and it's very bright and just doesn't work. So this is why we have the landing inner where we can put our overlay. Okay, and for VH, if you're not familiar with that, it stands for viewport heights, and you can basically think of the height of the browser as 100 different slices across, and we want to take up all 100. If I were to put 50 VH, and I've explained this in quite a few videos, it'll only take up 50 of those 100 slices. Okay, but we want it to be full screen. All right, next we're going to do the landing dash inner. Okay, so landing inner, we want to position as absolute, and so it's basically just going to completely cover the landing. Okay, it's parent. So let's see, we want to basically, the position we want from the top 0 and left 0. So from the top left hand corner, and then we want it to be 100% across, so we'll say width 100 and then 100% height, so it covers the whole thing. And then we want to add a background. It's going to be a color, but we want to do RGBA. Okay, and the reason for that is because RGBA allows us to specify an alpha value, which is an opacity value, so we can make it transparent. And we're going to make it black, which is just 3 zeros. Now if I did that, if I did RGB like that, that's not going to work. Or if I did a hexadecimal value, not going to work, because we need to add that extra value at the end, which is the opacity, which I'm going to set to 0.7. And if I save, now you can see that it's actually transparent. Okay, another thing we're going to do inside the landing inner is I'm just going to text align everything to the center, and let's add just a little bit of padding at the top of 50 pixels, and there we go. Now for the H1, this coming soon, and actually the counter will also be in H1, we're going to set a font size, so we're going to say landing H1, and let's set the font size of that to 50 pixels. And then I'm also going to set for the paragraph, we'll set a font size of 20 pixels. Okay, and the paragraph is this right here. All right, so let's see. The rest of the stuff, aside from the media queries, has to do with the countdown, and we can't see the countdown yet, so we're going to hop over to our JavaScript now so that we can get that settled. All right, so we're going to start off by creating a variable called countdown, and we're going to set this to the element with the class of countdown. So we're going to use document.querySelector, and we want to choose the class of countdown. Let me get rid of this sidebar. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the launch date. Okay, so we'll say const launch date, and let's set that to new date. Okay, we're going to use our JavaScript date constructor, and the launch date I'm going to choose is going to be January 1st of 2019, and I'm going to say it's going to be at 1 o'clock, so 13:00:00, and we want this as milliseconds, so we're going to tack on the getTime method, and that'll give us the milliseconds. All right, so if I were to console log here the launch date, save that, let's open up our console, and you'll see that we have the milliseconds for that. Okay, now we need to set an interval for every second. So every second we want the time to update, or the countdown to update. So let's say update every second, and I'm going to create a variable called int VL for interval, and we're going to use the JavaScript function setInterval. Okay, now setInterval takes in a function. I'm going to use an arrow function. This is an ES6 arrow function. You could just do the word function and get rid of the arrow like that, but I want to keep it more modern and use this syntax. And then the second parameter is how often do we want this to go on, which is every second. Now it takes milliseconds, so we want to do 1000, okay, every second. And if we were to do, like, let's say console.log hello, and let's save and let's let it run, you'll see right here every second it's console logging the word hello. Okay, so it's going to run every second, and that's what we want. All right, so in here what we want to do now is we want to get today's date and time, and we want to get it in milliseconds. Okay, this is also in milliseconds. So to do that, we can create a variable. I'll call it now, and we'll set it to the new date. And if we just do new date with no parameters, it's going to be today's date and time. And then we use get time to get the milliseconds. Okay, now what we want to do is get the distance from now to the launch date in milliseconds. And we can do that by, let's set a variable. Whoops, I don't want that to be capital. So distance equals, and then we can simply do launch date minus now. All right, and if we console.log distance and save, you can see that, well, it's actually going to do it every second, and it's going to give us the distance from then until now. And it's going to go down 1 second every time. All right, so next thing we want to do is our calculations. And this is how we get the days, the hours, all that stuff. And they're just general formulas to do that. I am horrible at math. I had to look this stuff up. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm not good with math. But basically we want to create our days variable and say floor, which is going to round down. And we want to take the distance and divide it by 1000 times 60 times 60 times 24. Okay, so 60 minutes in an hour, or 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. This is gonna get the days for us. And the next thing we want to do is get the hours. So we're going to do the same thing, math.floor, and we're going to take now distance, and we're going to use the modulus operator and pass in that same formula, so this right here. All right, and then we want to divide by 1000 times 60 times 60. All right, so that should give us the hours, and then we want to get the minutes. So we'll say mins, and we'll set that to math.floor, and this time we're going to put in here, actually, you know what, this part of the equation here should be in parentheses. So we want to put one there, and we want to put one here. And then I'm just going to copy this whole thing for minutes. And then we just want to change, let's see, all we have to do is get rid of one of these 60s. So it'll just be 1000 times 60. All right, and then I guess I'll just copy this down. And this will be our seconds. So seconds, and then we want to take this same thing. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. For the minutes, we don't want this last 24. So it should be, yeah, 1000 times 60 times 60 divided by 1000 times 60. And then for seconds, it should be 1000 times 60 for the first divided by 1000. So we don't need these parentheses because it's just 1000. Okay, and if you're not that great at math, that might confuse you. It does confuse me a little bit, but it's just a general formula. You'll see this all over the place online. So next thing we do, now that we can calculate all that stuff, is we want to display the result. Okay, so we're going to take that countdown variable, which is the countdown class. Okay, we set it to the element in the DOM, and we want to do inner HTML equals, and we have quite a bit to put in here, so I'm going to use a template string, which is part of the ES 2015 or ES6 standard. So we use backticks, not quotes, and we can mix in here HTML with variables. All right, so we're basically going to have 4 divs. Can I use Emmet in here? I'm not sure if I can. Yeah, I can. All right, so we have our divs, and then in here we want the days value, and this is how we can use a variable with template strings. So that'll be the value, and then we want the word days, but I want it inside of span. Oops, it's not working there. So we'll say span, like that, and we'll say days. All right, and then this next one here will be the hours. So we want that hours variable, our calculation. And then we'll say hours. Okay, so this one will be mins. We'll say minutes. And finally we have seconds. All right, so that's our output. Now the last thing we need to do is check to see if the time is already passed. Is it January 1st or later? And we can test that by simply saying, is distance less than 0? So let's say if launch date passed, which really, I mean, if it's your launch date, you're most likely not even going to have this up anymore, but just in case, we'll say distance, if it's less than 0, then let's stop the countdown, and we can do that by using clear interval. Okay, but we want to pass in the interval, which I called intvl. So clear that, and then let's just style and output some text that says launched. So we'll take the countdown, which is our element, our h1 countdown element. I'm going to set the style.color. I want it to be that bluish green color. So I'm going to set that to the hexadecimal value of 17A. 2B8, and then we just want to output some content, so we'll say countdown dot inner HTML equals, and we're just going to say launched, like that, and that's it. So let's save. Okay, so you can see that it's working, the functionality is working, and the seconds are counting down. If I were to, let's say, let's change it to January 2nd and save, and you can see now there's 298 days. All right, if I were to change the time to, let's say, 17, and you look at the hours, well, I guess that would add to the day as well, because, I mean, right now it's 1:08 p.m. But you can see that this is working. It just looks horrible. So now we want to go back to our CSS now that we have this done and continue on. All right, so the countdown itself, if we look, the countdown is just an H1, right? And it has, if we look at what we put inside of it, some divs, some spans, and so on. Now I guess that really doesn't make sense, does it? Because we don't want divs inside of an H1. So I'm actually going to change this to a div, not an H1. Okay, but then what we want to do is change this, just get rid of that H1. No, I'm sorry, not that. We just want to say countdown, and make sure we set the font size to the same 50 pixels. Alright, good. I didn't realize I did that. Anyways, let's continue on here. Now the countdown is going to be displayed as a flexbox. Okay, if I do that, it's going to automatically just align horizontally, which is what I want. If I were to make this bigger, you'll see that it's not in the middle. So we want to add a couple things here. We want to justify the content to the center. We want to align, not align content, we want align items to the center. And we'll also do text align to the center and save, and now it's pushed to the middle. Okay. And I can make this bigger, I guess, yeah. So let's see, next thing we're going to do is take each of the divs. Now the divs are the actual flex items. Countdown is the display flex. Everything in it, which are divs, is going to be the flex item. Okay, so let's go down here and let's say countdown div. And we want to, first of all, I'm going to set padding to 20 pixels. And we want a border around each div. So it's going to be border 1 pixel, solid, and white. Okay, so that gives us the border. I want a border radius. I want it to have a little bit of a curve. So we're going to say border radius 10 pixels. All right, we also want some margin to break them up because they're right on top of each other. So that moves them out. We want a little bit of opacity, a little bit of see-throughness here, transparency, say 0.7. And let's see, we want the background to be black. And there we go. All right, so next thing we want to do is, let's see, I want these days, hours, minutes, the words here, these are in spans, remember? If we look at our main.js, those are all in spans, so we can target those by saying countdown span, and we want a display block which will knock it onto the next line. If I save that, and then just change the font size, make it smaller. So we'll set the font size to half, which will be 25. And there we go. Now the first one, which is the days, I think that's the most important, so I want that to have the bluish background. So what I'll do is I'll say countdown, and actually I want this up here. Yeah, so we'll do countdown, and we can grab the first one by saying div first child. So that'll grab the first div, which is the days box, and we're going to set the background to hexadecimal 17A 2B8. All right, so we'll save that, and there we go. So now the days has the bluish greenish background. All right, so we're pretty much done for this screen size. But if I were to make this smaller, you'll see it's not responsive at all. Okay, same thing with the height. So we want to change that. So we're going to add our media queries. I'm going to go down here and let's do a media query for any screen size that is 650 pixels or less. So we want to do max width of 650 pixels. And for those of you that aren't really familiar with media queries, it just means that anything that we put inside of here is only going to be in effect if the device that you're viewing this on or the browser is 650 pixels or less. Okay, so if I were to take the body and say display none and save, it's going to go away because right now it's less than 650. If I go above 650, the body shows because that's no longer in effect. So what I want to do in here is take the landing image first of all. So this actually should be class landing, and we want the img. and I'm just going to set the width to be 70%. Okay, that's going to make it a little smaller and it's going to make it fit better. Okay, so you can see once I hit 650, the logo is basically relative, and it has a percentage of 70%. All right, next thing I want to do is the coming soon text. I want to make that a little smaller, so I'm going to say down here, landing actually we can do just landing H1 now that I think about it, because before we had two H1s, and that's really the only reason that I had these classes. So we can get rid of that, make that a little bit cleaner, and then we can go back and we can just do landing H1. So landing H1, let's do font size 40 pixels. Okay, so that made that a little smaller. Let's also do the countdown. Let's see, countdown. I'm going to set the font size to 30 pixels. All right, now you could make this even smaller, and you could keep the hours and minutes and seconds if you wanted to, but I don't really want to make it too small. So that's why I'm going to do the getting rid of the hours, minutes, and seconds and just doing the days. And I'm going to just change the flex orientation to be in a column fashion. So what I'll do is actually in this countdown, I'll say flex direction. It's already displayed as flex from above, but we want to change this to column and save, and it just changes the orientation to be vertical. Okay, let's see. So I want to get rid of these because, again, if you're on a mobile device, it's probably going to be shorter and there's no scrolling. So I want everything to definitely be visible. But you can do some testing if you want. That's just what I'm choosing to do. So I'm going to take all of the divs from countdown, which are the flex items, and we're going to display none. And if I save, it's going to get rid of all of them. Okay. Now we want to grab the first one, which is the days. So we're going to say countdown div, and we're going to use the pseudo first child selector. And we want to then set that to display as a block instead of display none. And if I save, then that will show. All right, and I'm also going to set the width to 80%. Save that, and let's also make the padding a little less. It's 20 right now. I'm going to set it to 10. Okay, and there we go. So now it is responsive width-wise. So now what I want to do is take care of the height, because right now if we get to a certain height, let me just bring this up, it just doesn't look right. So let's add some media queries for height, and this is going to be pretty easy. So we'll say media, and let's do height, or I'm sorry, max height. So max height of 600. Then I want the image, which is the logo, to have a width of 20%. So I'll save that, and you'll see that the image automatically gets smaller. And then I don't want to display the paragraph, so I'm going to just say display none. All right, now if it gets even smaller, like right here, then I want to get rid of the H1, so I'm just going to add one more media query and just change the max height to 400 instead of 6, and then simply put in the H1 here and display that to none and save, and there we go. We probably want to add, let's add a little bit of padding to the image to the bottom, because they're like right on top of each other now. So we'll say padding bottom 30 pixels, and there we go. That's good. All right. Good. So now it's responsive in every way. And that's it. All right, so we now have a landing page that has a countdown. Feel free to experiment with it a little bit if you want to change some things up, if you want to, of course, change the logo and the background and all that. But it gives you kind of a boilerplate for future projects. You know, when you're working on them for your clients, you can throw up a page with their logo, and now you can really understand everything rather than going and finding a template. There's plenty of under construction templates you can buy, but now you've actually coded this yourself and you understand everything and you can easily edit it and stuff. All right. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot is the favicon. So in the in the image folder, you have this favicon PNG. If you want to use that up here, then one of the tools that I use is, I'm just going to search for Favicon Generator, and there's a few of them. The one that I've used for, I've used this for years, I mean like 7 or 8 years now, is this tools.dynamicdrive.com/favicon, and you can simply choose a file. We're going to grab this favicon PNG, and we're going to click create icon, and it's going to basically just translate it or convert it into an ICO file that we can download. And I'm going to put that right in, let's see, where am I? Into my project folder, which I think I have in here and here. So I'm going to save it basically to the root of the page, the coming soon landing folder that I created. So I'm going to save it there. All right, and then close that up, and then just grab this right here, which is just a link to that ICO file or ICO file, and we're going to go to our index.html and just throw this in right under the link to the CSS. Okay, and I'll save that. Now if you reload, you're not going to see, you might not see it. If you don't, just hit Control F5, which will clear your cache, and now you can see that it's there as our favicon. And of course, you know, if you're doing this for your own projects, you're probably not going to want that image, but just to show you an easy way to do it. Okay, but that's going to be it, guys, for this video. Before I go, I just want to mention real quick that a lot of you guys, tons of you guys, offered so much support and positive comments in my last video, where it was kind of personal. I talked about my past and a little bit of just, you know, stuff that I thought maybe I'd be judged for, but the support was just insane. The like to dislike ratio was insane, and I just thank you guys for that. Really, that really just made my day. It really did. I just wanted to mention that. All right, so that's it, guys. Thanks, and I will see you in the next video. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. If you're serious about landing a career in tech but lack the formal education or background, Coding Dojo will get you there in no time. With over 3,000 graduates to date, over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year at tech firms of all sizes, from companies like Google to local startups. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below.